Albert Speer once said that if Adolf Hitler could truly be said to have had a friend, he would have been one of the close ones. Speer had been Hitler's architect, and after 1942 became his highly efficient Minister of Armaments and War Production. As such, he was the principal Nazi employer of forced labor. And at the Nuremberg war crimes trial, Speer, the only defendant to plead guilty, was sentenced to 20 years confinement in Spandau prison. He was released in 1966. Now 65, Albert Speer lives in the family home his father built in Heidelberg. His files are full of relics and mementos of the Nazi period. His memoirs of that time are a bestseller in West Germany, have already been translated into many other languages, and will soon appear in English. Because he is the last surviving member of Hitler's true inner circle, Albert Speer is a man uniquely qualified to talk of Hitler and his henchmen.
This is a CBS News special, Hitler and his henchmen, with CBS News chief foreign correspondent, Charles Collingwood.
What was the daily round of life like in Hitler's circle? What was the routine, for instance?
With one word, it was unbelievable dull. One should have thought that a man like Hitler would like to talk with scientists or to have concerts of famous artists. He could have had also things easily, but his entourage was on a very low level. There were just the secretaries, the doctors, the adjutants, and the press chief, and so on. Hitler came down very late in the morning, at 11:30, and then he was sitting over some news, and then we all went to lunch, and the conversation, one can't say it was on a high level. There was a talk about breeding dogs, or about love affairs, or about the newest movies, or about famous singer, and the latest news of gossips of society in Munich, and so. It was really extremely flat conversation. I often said that the only who didn't obey Hitler's orders in this time and had a will of their own, that were the dogs which were strolling around.
What were his relations with Eva Braun, his mistress?
Hitler kept her hidden, in some way hidden, in a disgusting way hidden. I think a man should stand, if he has a love girl, to her and show her, to his entourage at least, but he tried even to conceal before us that he is in love with her.
Do you think he really loved her?
Not love. I don't think love in a good sense. I think she was just, well, his girlfriend in a normal sense to satisfy him. So she was just for bad.
Was she a nice person?
I must say I liked her in some way, because she was one of the few in this circle around Hitler which wasn't corrupted by the position in which they have been. I was corrupted too, I must tell.
What about the people around Hitler who seem to us in the West to be a very strange gang indeed? What about Goering, for instance, who seemed to us to be almost a comedian? What kind of person was he?
During First World War, he was one of the fighter aces of the German Air Forces. And I think he was, in this time, a brave man. But he was one of the first who was corrupted by power after Hitler started to be the chief of the German nation. He lost his willpower, and he was a fat man who was no more handling his job properly. To this came then that, as it was found out in Nuremberg, that he was a morphinist.
He took drugs.
He took drugs, yes. And of course, this weakened him too.
Did Hitler know that Goering was a drug addict?
when I last met Hitler in this bunker, the 23rd of April, he said of Göring, I knew always that he was corrupt and that he was using morphine, and I shouldn't have allowed this.
Did Goering really paint his face and wear corsets and that sort of thing?
I can't tell if he has worn corsets, but he painted his face and his fingernails, that's for sure. And he had the big diamonds on his robe, big rings on his finger, very costly ones. And he looked like one of those old dukes of the Renaissance time sometimes.
What about Goebbels, the propaganda minister? Was he an able man?
I should say so. Goebbels in some way was one of those intellectuals, as I was one. And he was working hard, and he could make proper decisions. Of course, he made decisions which were connected with his hate against the Jews, for instance, or against the political enemies. So all his abilities were directed against them.
Mm. And that, of course, fitted into what Hitler wanted to do, really, didn't it?
Of course, for Hitler, he was one of the very able collaborators of him.
Martin Bormann seems one of the sinister figures of the regime.
Martin Bormann was unusually skilled in using Hitler's power for his own power. He had the administration of Hitler's private sources, which is always a thing very important for a dictator. And with this start, he got very close to Hitler, and he could always come to him, and he made use of this possibility. And after a while, Bormann was one of the most powerful men.
There's a theory that Bormann was not killed on that day in Berlin when Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Do you think that he's the kind of man who could have got away?
In any case, when I met him last time in the bunker in the Reichschancellery, and this was only 6 days before the final collapse, in this bunker, before Hitler shot himself, Bormann really pleaded that I try my influence on Hitler to fly out of Berlin, and the way he did it, I had the feeling that Bormann didn't want to commit suicide, that in any case he would have liked to survive as long as possible. Of course, the other part of the story is mysterious to me too. I can't tell anything because I didn't hear anything which makes it certain that he lives or that he is dead.
What did you think of Hess in the days when he was a powerful figure in Germany?
He made a rather peculiar impression. I remember one thing which happened in the Reichschancellery when Hess sometimes went there to dine with Hitler. Then his adjutant was carrying behind him some vessels with food, and they were warmed up in Hitler's kitchen and were served to Hess. Hitler didn't find out about for a long time. But then when he found out, he said to Hess, well, why you don't eat my food? I have an excellent cook for diet, and you just, your doctor's orders, you give it to her and she will do. He said, no, I don't eat this food because I have a special food made on special, in a special way. And then Hitler was rude and told him, well, if you don't like the food here, then don't come anymore to eat. Your own food you can eat at home. Well, Hess was, then he didn't come anymore to eat Hitler's food because he wanted to have his own food. It shows a kind of peculiarity, I think, which was not often observed in this time.
Was Hitler himself the only one of the group to keep a mistress, or was there an active love life among the top Nazis?
Well, there was mainly the life of Bormann and of Goebbels to think about. Those two were really chasing women. And Goebbels, for instance, he used his power as the highest of the whole movie production to get in close contact with the young movie actresses. And then in the end, that's well known, he had a love affair with Lydie Bauer, who was a good actress. And from this, there was caused a lot of trouble because Frau Goebbels was not willing to have this mistress in her own family, what Goebbels wanted to have. Bormann was similar. He also was forcing, more or less, his wife that his mistress was going in and out in the household of Bormanns, with also children present there of Bormann. And so things were, so far as I know, well known to Hitler, because Eva Braun, she despised it a bit, but curiously enough, she was in a similar position. And she certainly told Hitler about it, but Hitler didn't do anything to change it.
Again is Charles Collingwood with Albert Speer.
When did you feel yourself that Germany was going to lose the war?
You can't, if you have people of the same intelligence level on both sides, which was the case, you can't lead a war for long if the capacity, industrial capacity, is so much higher on the other side. I said already in 42 that it's highest time to win the war, that if we don't win the war from 42 to 43, then the war can't be won anymore. Well, then Stalingrad happened, and this was probably the end of the war.
If it was known by a great many people that the war was irretrievably lost by then, why was it that there weren't more plots instead of just the July 20th plot against Hitler?
First thing, that those who were willing to say yes to Hitler were now almost everywhere around Hitler. Second thing, those few who would have done some opposition in the face of Hitler were scared. But a part of that, Hitler ordered that all the relatives of those who were in this plot are to be put in concentration camp forever. And this was a danger which everybody who was inclined to oppose Hitler was considering.
Weren't you yourself suspected of complicity in the July 20th attempt on Hitler's life?
Afterwards, to my surprise, I learned that I was a member of the government they wanted to start with after they had succeeded with the plot.
Your name had been on the list of the government that they wanted to replace Hitler with.
That's it. And a few days after the 20th of July, Kaltenbrunner, the chief of the Gestapo, and a man everybody was naturally afraid of, was announced that he will see me on urgent matters. And he was coming in and asked me bluntly, what you know about the 20th of July? I told him the truth, that I didn't know anything. But then he pulled out of his pocket a paper and told me, show here, that's the list of the new government of those, the 20th of July, and you are on the list. And really, I was there for the armaments, but luckily enough, somebody, I don't know, made behind my name with pencil a question mark, and I think that helped. I could only tell Kaltenbrunner the truth, that I didn't know anything of those intentions.
You had thoughts of your own, didn't you, toward the end about assassinating Hitler?
That's right, but
What did you try to do, Herr Speer?
I knew the Reichschancellery very well because I was the architect of this Reichschancellery, and in the bunker where Hitler lived in this time, because every night there were air attacks and he said he can only sleep there. This bunker had air conditioning system, of course, and the outside air was taken from a kind of a opening in the garden. From there it went into the air ducts to be distributed. And together with a friend of mine who was in charge of the whole ammunition, we tried to get gas and to see that we can get this gas inside this entry of the air, so Hitler would have been killed by air, by the gas. It was all prepared. After a few days, when I checked the place again, there, to my surprise, a chimney was built about 10 feet high, and the air intake was now through this chimney, so I couldn't reach it anymore with the gas. My plans were no more possible. Hitler, in this time, he said that it's the experience of the First World War, where he was poisoned by gas, that the gas is heavier than air, and if a chimney is built, no gas can ever come inside the shelter. Of course, he thought of an air attack or such a thing.
Of course, in your high position with the resources at your command, if you had really wanted to kill Hitler at the risk of your own life, at the sacrifice of your own life, you could have done it, couldn't you?
Yeah. If I would have been willing to sacrifice my own life, certainly I would have had a chance to kill him, even with the difficulties we had in this time, because after the 20th of July, all the suitcases had to be given to the adjutant and to be searched if there are any weapons in.
The briefcases you brought in?
Briefcases, yes. Mm-hmm. But, well, there would have been any chance to do it. But I was, I'm still shuddering by the thought that I wanted to kill somebody. I think it's not the right thing, even in such a situation. Some friend of me who knew about such things, he said, "Let's God do it." And I think he was right.
Yet after all that, and at the moment of the collapse of Germany, you went back to Berlin and saw him in the bunker where he finally died. He must still have had a great deal of power over you.
Well, then the war was finally lost, and Hitler made the impression of a man who is disintegrating fast. He had spots of wood on his shirt, and he looked rather ill-kept. Also, his entourage, who was always admiring him, now they let them go. They were drinking in his presence liquor or wine. They were drunk in a corner, or they didn't get up when he entered the room. I had pity with him. Of course, now I must say, it was absolutely wrong. He didn't deserve any pity. I saw him as a hopeless man he just spoke about his death, that he will be, he is looking forward now to be finished with his life. I said goodbye to him, and his reaction was very curious, because he said goodbye to me as I wouldn't have flown in, just would be one of the visitors of every day, didn't say anything to me, and was again very cool. It showed up afterwards when he made his last will, that in this last will he had chosen another minister of armaments. Of course, the whole last will was ridiculous, because to choose a minister of armaments, the 30th of April, was no more of any use, because there was no more armaments in the hands of the Germans.
In your high position, in charge of so much labor in Germany, you must have known about the concentration camps. But you never protested to Hitler about it, did you?
Well, it's easy to reproach myself nowadays, and I am not, I don't want to make any excuses about it. I saw many things. I learned to know many things. I knew that there are concentration camps, for example, in 38 or 39. And I knew that the conditions in those concentration camps are very hard, that people there are afraid of their lives. But I didn't do anything. I could have known the truth if I, in my position, would have only wanted to know this truth. For instance, when one day a friend of mine, who was Gau leader of Lower Silesia, came to see me, he said, never visit a concentration camp in Upper Silesia. I have just seen. Horrible things are going on there. Don't ask me anything about it. Well, I should have asked him the same moment. And I should have gone immediately to Hitler and asked him what's going on in the concentration camp. This Gau leader was telling me. I didn't do anything like that. This included the extermination of the Jews, too. And I still am thinking that even in an authoritarian system, where everything is split up, a leading member of a government is responsible for everything which happens in this government.
And since you didn't seek to excuse yourself at Nuremberg, you received a very severe sentence, 20 years. Do you feel now that that sentence was too harsh?
No, after all, I don't think that it was too heavy. Only the fact that I was a member of Hitler's government and was not willing to know what is happening, that I missed this chance, was enough to give me such a severe sentence.
You must think about that a great deal now.
I had 20 times in Spandau prison to think about
20 years.
it. 20 years to think about it. And I still am thinking about it, and I think this burden will never leave me.